This time last week, I stood outside next to my Ford Charge Station Pro with this very cup, filled with a lovely beverage, and I very eagerly told you about how I had gained root access to my Ford Charge Station Pro. I told you about how, thanks to some other F-150 Lightning owner forum members, I had discovered a fault with the code base in that charging station that meant that there was a logging error. It basically caused a file on the disk to fill up, take up all the disk space, and then that stopped the computer inside the charging station from properly working, which was why my station kept disconnecting from the Wi-Fi. That was then, this is now. And oh boy, you have some thoughts? And I've got an update. As those eagle-eyed among you will know, this is a Ford Charge Station Pro. It is currently naked, sitting atop my desk, connected to a UART cable, connected to a makeshift 220 volt supply. Don't ask how I made that 220 volt supply. You wouldn't like the answer. But it's on my desk because, well, immediately following last week's video and the publishing thereof, things went a bit awry, and it's got nothing to do with the fact that I gained root access to the charging station, however bad it might now look. So I'm going to take you back in time and explain the sequence of events, give you a really good bit of news that I didn't give you last week, and then explain what I've been doing in the last 7 days to make sure that this never ever happens again. As I said in my introduction, last week I managed to fix my Ford Charge Station Pro. I'm not going to go into the specifics of it. As I stated last week, I don't want people who don't have the know-how to actually do this unless they're willing to deal with the consequences of it. But basically, this is an SD card. I built a special one of these with software on it from another forum member on the F-150 Lightning Owners Forum, and it allowed me to gain root access. Now, how that worked was, normally when you boot up a computer, it looks for a special file that tells the computer what it is, how it's going to operate. It loads the operating system, it tells the computer where to look for the operating system, and all of that good stuff. I have dumbed that down incredibly, and I know that there are going to be some well actually people in the comments. Don't bother. The boot file that we created and put on my Ford Charge Station Pro bypasses the stock loader, and what it does is it goes, hey, please drop into a shell, which is basically a way of interacting with the computer, and that then allowed me to go in and change some permissions on some files that then gave me what's known as root access. Now, if you're not a computer nerd, you may not know what root access is, but it's a bit like having the master key for a house. So you might have keys for all the different rooms in your house, or maybe it's a hotel, and you have that master key and that allows you to open all the doors. And with root access, I was able to make changes to my Ford Charge Station Pro's file system. I was able to identify the error that I just talked about last week, and I was able to make sure that that error was dealt with appropriately, removed the errant file. Yes, I made sure that it wasn't being written to at the time. And then I rebooted my charge station, and wouldn't you know, the network came back online. But in fixing a single line of code, there was just a single errant backtick that wasn't present in one of the configuration files for Django, which is part of the system that serves up web pages that allows you to connect to the charge station remotely. That error in the configuration file meant that it wasn't sending the log file to the right place, and that meant that it was filling up the hard drive and everything was breaking. Once I'd fixed that, something else amazing happened. The very next day, we had a monster storm move through the area, and it was so loud It woke us up at about 3 o'clock in the morning. So I'm laying in bed with my wife, the dogs are at the foot of the bed, the storm is raging, the dogs are trying to hide from the storm, we're trying to get back to sleep, and the storm is approaching and approaching and approaching, and the distance between the lightning flashes and the thunderclaps is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And then there's this big clap of thunder, an almost instantaneous bolt of lightning. There's a click that we hear, an audible click, and the power goes out. And about 60 seconds later, they came back on again. Now, bear in mind, to this point, my Ford Charge Station Pro has never done automatic power transfer, not without me intervening in some way or another. It did automatic power transfer while the truck was asleep, while the charging station was just sitting there connected to the truck. 60 seconds after the power went out, the lights came back on. And initially I thought, oh, maybe the mains power had come back on. But no, it was the truck. It automatically kicked on. And I figured out that that one missing backslash was also causing the automatic power transfer to fail. So with those two fixes, I was happy as Larry. After the sun came up and we were ready to get up, we checked on the truck. It was still providing power. There had been no issues in the night. While we waited for the local utility company to come and replace all the fuses, I think there were like 8 or 9 down our street on a single row that had all been blown by the storm. I logged back in using my newly acquired root access to see if I could figure out what happened. And yeah, my fix to the code also fixed the backup power solution. A single backslash. The tech folk among you will know the pain of that. And you may also make questions about how that particular error passed quality control. Long story very short, they came and fixed the power, replaced the fuse, and the truck went back to charging and filled up its battery pretty quickly. But also, while that was happening, my Charge Station Pro was downloading fresh software in the background. And this is why I know some of you are going to be like, Ford knew you were doing something naughty and they punished you straight away. But the reality is that my charging station has been waiting for an over-the-air update now for a couple of months. Ford pushed this update some time ago. But because the error in the logging file had filled up the hard drive, there was no space for the charging station to go online and pull the latest software update down that would, add new features and supposedly fix any bugs. And as soon as I went in and I removed that errant file that was causing all the hang-ups, and I replaced the line of code that was causing the problem in the first place, there was nearly 1.5 gigabytes of storage space, which is more than enough for the truck's charging station to download the latest software update and store it in memory. Now, in order to protect both the charging station and the vehicle connected to it, the charging station won't apply an over-the-air software update while there is a vehicle physically plugged in and charging, or even just connected. And so what happened was, it looked as though everything was fine until I unplugged the truck and the charging station went, oh, she's unplugged. Let's do the software update. And the software update applied. I actually had 2, one after the other. The first one dropped and it still gave me access. The second one that followed basically locked us out. And it didn't just lock us out of the charging station, it locked us out completely. And again, this was just bad timing and pure coincidence. This was not Ford deciding or Siemens deciding that I did something I shouldn't have done to my charging station and punishing me. It just so happened that the latest software update for the Ford Charge Station Pro not only fixed the bug that I found and reached out to Ford about, but it patched the security loophole that has been documented now for many years. And actually, various security researchers have posted about it. Hey, this is a vulnerability that needs to be patched in this particular charging station. The same vulnerability that I used to gain root access, Siemens clearly decided at some point in the last couple of months that that was the fix that needed to be applied. They rolled out the fix, and now when I try and boot this charging station, if I try and boot it from the SD card, it gives me an error and says it's not properly authorized. And so in order to wrench control from Siemens and Ford back again, I'm gonna have to play around with the software on these. Now, you might notice that there's a Ford Charge Station Pro here, and I was pointing at this one and saying this one is the one that's got the new software on. And it is. This is the one that was on the outside of the house. This is the one that got the over-the-air software update. You'll see I have an Ethernet cable connected, I've got a USB connection here. This is my UART, and it's connected to the Pro, but the station is currently off. And like I say, I have a makeshift 240 volt supply to power it on. You can also power it from a 12 volt supply. And I think right now this unit is bricked. Worse still, owners who have this charging station, who are F-150 Lightning owners, say that after the software update was applied, not only did Ford and Siemens fix the loophole that allowed some of us to get in, but it basically broke the charging station to the point that you cannot connect with the smartphone app anymore. So even if you're not trying to hack it or gain access to hardware that you own, by the way, I'm not trying to hack other people's stuff. This is something that I own, that is no longer made, that is no longer really supported. People can't get in, and they can't even use the official app to commission the stations. So they've been broken, and I know Ford is looking at a solution. I know Siemens is looking at a solution right now, but I don't know of one other than them sending someone out with one of these with just the right software on to be able to unlock it and get it booting again. As you know though, I have two Ford Charge Station Pros. This was the one that was outside, and the one that's outside now is the one that was in this office when all of that went down. It has also got my fix to the bug on it, but it doesn't have the newest software. And it doesn't have the newest software because when I was fixing both of these, I kind of had this thought in the back of my head that maybe I should lock one out and not allow it to connect to the internet in case something like this happened. And it happened. And so the unit that I've prevented from going online is still running the old software, and I've made so many improvements to it. The first thing I did was I've actually run a permanent Ethernet connection using just basically this Amazon basic 1 gigabit Ethernet adapter that goes into an Ethernet cable there, RJ45, and then a USB-A. That's now in my Ford Charge Station Pro outside. I have tweaked the system, the Linux system inside the other unit so that it uses the Ethernet as its primary network interface. I've changed all of my code on my Home Assistant integration to work with that rather than the Wi-Fi. And the Wi-Fi is still being flaky, it still drops off, it still crashes and does all of those things, but the Ethernet connection is rock solid. I've also made some other tweaks to the code base. One of the things I've done is enabled TCP Modbus, which means that I can finally control, using Home Assistant, the charge rate of my Ford Charge Station Pro. So it comes from the factory with a little dial in here that allows me to change the maximum current. And I also want to acknowledge that what I previously said about maybe it overheating is obviously wrong. At the very heart of the issue that we've been chasing now for years is the fact that there was a memory leak or a storage leak that was allowing the storage to fill up without properly dealing with that, and eventually it filled up the disk and the disk had no space and therefore it couldn't operate properly. It wasn't anything to do with heat, and that means I can now operate it up to 80 amps because I have a 100 amp breaker. But Modbus over TCP means that I can now change that. So if it's a sunny day and we're producing lots of energy on our roof, we can have it set to the maximum current. But if it's a peak period of demand and I want the truck to charge at 16 amps instead of 80 amps, I just move a slider in my Home Assistant integration and it works. Now, I'm not ready to share the ins and outs of that with you all yet, but it's definitely a work in progress, and I will write it up when I have got it all done. Now let's talk about the legalities, because a lot of people in the comments threatened me with federal crime reporting and all of that stuff. And I just want to be clear here. I'm doing this for my own research. I'm not intending to hack any of Ford's stuff or any of Siemens stuff. This is a product that I own. I have prevented it from going online. I now have 100% local control of it, of its charging rate, and all of the information that comes from that unit. Ford's most recent over-the-air update, or rather Siemens' most recent over-the-air update for this unit, also removed some of the information that this unit was publicly sharing over the local network that allowed us in the first place to pull data from it for my Home Assistant integration. They've removed details about the IP address, they've removed details about some of the charging capabilities. It's almost as if someone's gone in and gone, oh, we don't want people to have access to that, we're going to remove it. But because I've firewalled my charging station, there's no way that anybody can reach in to my home network and stop that unit from having the functionality it has. And as long as I keep an eye on it, and as long as I make sure it stays in a good, healthy operating setup, I shouldn't have any issues. Obviously, if I was hacking into somebody else's unit, yes, there'd be ethical concerns there, right? But this is my unit, I own it, it came with my truck, it's out of warranty now. The truck is nearly out of warranty. The original truck definitely would have been out of warranty. And I passionately believe in right to repair and the right to work on your own stuff. It's no different to me working on this, my Vectrix VX1 motherboard, which, by the way, I've just added a new DC to DC converter. There's a new video coming soon talking about that, but I've just soldered in a new DC to DC converter. These are my soldering skills here. And in the last week, I've also been making on my CNC machine these brass replacements for the standoffs for some of the power ports. So this is one of the originals, and this is one I made in brass on my CNC. I had to learn how to use CNC, I had to learn how to program it. I've had so many trials and errors, just like trials and errors trying to get this working. Knowledge should be available to everybody. Information is what makes us unique. Sharing of information, growing, learning, collaborating. And while I feel that, yeah, there are some things that people are going to want money for, if I can help other people keep these charging stations online and operational long after the company that made them, long after the company whose name is on that charging station has no interest in keeping them alive, so be it. I'm currently working on a project. I've been talking with Martin at Martin Rebuilds and a couple of other F-150 Lightning owners. I'm working on a new project called Mellon. You may have seen it in the on the channel in the community posts, but it's basically an add-on for people with the WOLFBOX tonneau cover, and it adds back some functionality that the WOLFBOX tonneau cover does not have out of the box, out of the factory. And I'm really excited on that. I'm currently coding to try and fix it, and yes, full disclosure, I am using some AI assistants to write the code. I'm not using a generative AI, but I'm using it more of a syntax checking and making sure that I'm not making any stupid mistakes. I have LLMs here at the house in my server room that I'm using, and that means that the code base hopefully will be a little better. I used a little bit of LLM assistance to identify the bug with this. And again, while I am definitely against generative AI, i.e. make me a picture or take something away from a human, computers are very good at spotting patterns and very good at spotting errors in patterns. So I can tell an LLM, look at this code, tell me if there's an issue, as a syntax error. And it spotted it, and that's how we found it. So Lots of stuff happening. Hopefully I've answered some of the questions about this charging station. I know this has been a little bit of a rambly video, but I want you all to understand that I'm not trying to reverse engineer in a nefarious way, but rather make sure that something I own and that I rely on continues to operate long after the people that made it have forgotten about its existence. Thanks for watching to the end. If you have, thank you very much. If you'd like to join the amazing list of people either side of me scrolling by, they are the reason we are still here. Without these amazing people, there's about 1,500 of you on this list these days. We wouldn't be able to pay the team, we wouldn't be able to pay our bills, and we wouldn't be able to keep a roof over our heads. My beloved Kate lost her job at the start of June due to corporate restructuring. She's still chasing some leads right now, but hasn't had any offers yet. So without your support, not only would Transport Evolved no longer be here, but I would no longer have a house to live in. So I really would appreciate it if you'd consider supporting us some $1.50 a month. Every little dollar helps, and if you can't support us financially, just know that sharing our content and interacting with it really, really helps. So thank you for watching, thank you for being the positive change that we need to see in the world, and until next time, keep evolving.